Guantanamo Bay, when we hear the words Guantanamo Bay, we all have a real, gut reaction to it, because it really stood as one of the most potent symbols of unlawful detention in the world today. And the prolonged detention of people without trial and the use of torture in the camp did evoke outrage all over the world, especially amongst human rights groups, and from all those who respect human rights. And I think we were also outraged by the complicity of our government and by other governments, complicity in Guantanamo Bay by countries who signed the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And of course it's the 60th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights, but so often we see those human rights just ignored throughout the world. And of course we're very pleased that the new American president has actually closed Guantanamo Bay, but a lot still needs to be done. And this is the work of the Omar Foundation and the work that Jackie Chase will be talking to us about, and Omar. As we said, this is reflections on Guantanamo Bay, but it's also looking at all that still needs to be done. Now, first of all, Omar Deghayes, who we are very, very honoured to have amongst us this afternoon. Very honoured to see you, Omar. Thank you very much indeed for coming. It's wonderful to have you here with us. And just for those who don't know Omar's story, though I expect most of you probably do, but just very briefly, Omar was one of the last remaining British residents imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay. And Omar came from Libya, where his father, who was a Democrat and a trade unionist, was assassinated by Colonel Gaddafi's regime. And his country fled, his family fled to this country, and they settled outside Brighton. And Omar always had an ambition to be a human rights lawyer, and he studied law in UK universities, and then he travelled to Malaysia and Pakistan and Afghanistan, where he met and married. And when war broke out, Omar wanted to make sure his family was safe, so he came to Pakistan en route to coming home, and there is where the dreadful story begins, because there he was arrested by bounty hunters and taken to Bagram, which he says was like a Nazi prison camp. And then, of course, he went on to Guantanamo Bay, where he suffered further human rights abuses and was attacked with pepper spray, and he is now sadly blind in one eye. And of course, he did see all the human rights abuses and the tortures that went on in Guantanamo Bay. Now, during all his years in detention, Omar, like many others, had no trial and was never charged with any crime, and the only evidence for his arrest was a video allegedly showing Omar from the Spanish authorities. However, experts confirmed what was apparent, that the person in the video wasn't Omar. Now, after an amazing amount of very active campaigning by Omar's family and by the group, the Save Omar Campaign group, and I think it was about 2 years ago, perhaps 18 months ago, a member of that group came to talk to our Amnesty group here, and that's really where we became involved with Omar and the Justice and Peace group and the Peace and Justice group, Eastbourne Peace and Justice group. And when I was asking Jackie how I was going to introduce her, she said, "Well, I'm a music teacher and a mum." So, music teacher and mum, Jackie, but she does a lot apart from being a music teacher and a mum. And she was part of the Save Omar campaign, which, as I just said, really campaigned terrifically hard to ensure Omar's return to his family from Guantanamo Bay. And the group really did provide the political hope and the practical support for the Deghayes family, who very courageously spoke out about Omar's story and family history, and drew support from the Muslim community. And Brighton's paper, The Argus, also ran its own very principled campaign. And I think it's a phrase I really liked was Clive Stafford Smith, who at the group's first public meeting said, and it's a great quote, he said, "The arguments against Guantanamo would be most effective, the court where the arguments against Guantanamo Guantanamo Bay would be most effective was the court of public opinion. And I think the campaign, which was so successful, really did prove that. And I think it's very heartening to all those of us who work to change public opinion. It actually does work. It actually is worth the effort, because sometimes we feel so absolutely impotent and useless in the face of bureaucracy and governments and so on. But the court of public opinion, it actually works. So now that Omar is free and at home with his family in Saltdean, Jackie and fellow activists continue to campaign with Omar for the safe return of everybody in dark prisons and against illegal detention and human rights abuses wherever they are, because Guantanamo Bay is just the beginning, but no way must it be the end of the campaign. So on behalf of Our Lady of Ransom, Justice and Peace Group, Eastbourne Peace and Liberty, Our Lady of Ransom, all of you are very, very, very welcome. You're very welcome. We're very pleased that you've come, and I hand over to you. Thank you.
So heartwarming to see such a fabulous attendance here this afternoon. Thanks so much for coming. We're really grateful to you for coming to listen to us. As you can see, we're struggling miserably with this video at the moment. So I think rather than waste your time, and so that we still have a good chunk of time for questions, if we could just go on. We were hoping to show you this film first because it's important. It's the story of Ali al-Mari, who was the only man being held in the United States in this peculiar way they have, which is called enemy combatant status. And enemy combatant status is what they do to somebody essentially when they want to remove them from the ordinary judicial system, where we're all subjects of the rule of law and we would go through judicial courts. But when you take people into military law and military courts, they're enemy combatant status. And we'll have a discussion about this definition business of enemy combatant status later on as well. But there is one man only being held on the United States soil in this enemy combatant status. That is the status that all the men at Guantanamo Bay are held under. They're not held under the rule of law. They're held under this enemy combatant status. Yeah? And he's being held at the Charleston Naval Brig in South Carolina. It's a 250-celled naval brig of cells 6 foot by 9 foot. There were 3 men being held there. There's now only 1 man being held there. So you can imagine the implications for him. He's being detained there without any charges. He has been tortured. He has been abused. He has been held in solitary confinement for 58 times the acceptable, in inverted commas, level of time that somebody can be held in solitary confinement, which is 30 days. And he's been allowed 1 phone call in 18 months to his family. He's barely allowed a shower. He's barely allowed any physical activity. And of course, there's no one to do any physical activity with. There isn't even anyone for him to just play a game of Scrabble with. His mental state, everybody is deeply worried about. He apparently is now so depressed and into himself, he could be mistaken. His lawyer said he could be mistaken for a piece of furniture. He's so still. And he can't bear any kind of physical contact with other human beings. It's very important that this man is either brought to court or he is, which means moving him back into the proper judicial system, or that he is freed and returned to his family in Qatar. And it's important that there is no more enemy combatant status on the US soil, because there is talk at the moment of moving some of the men from Guantanamo to the United States. Now, obviously, we don't want any more people being detained with enemy combatant status. We want them to have access to the rule of law.
Hello everyone. I firstly would like to thank all of you for inviting me to such a lovely meeting, to a nice city as your city, a brilliant city that I like so much since I was a child, where they used to bring me here sometimes, holidays, and I came here when I was in a young age, where I had to do my A-levels in Eastbourne. Also, I'd like to thank those of you who've campaigned so hard on our behalf when we were locked up in Guantanamo Bay, and helped to bring the attention to our case, and eventually the release of myself, the release of many others, through your hard efforts and work and campaigning. And I would like to thank you very much for that first. I would like to speak about tonight, ladies and gentlemen, to just try to speak about how it feels that to be in Guantanamo Bay, locked up in Guantanamo Bay every morning when we wake up in Guantanamo Bay. There is a possibility, there is a fear of us being killed, dying inside those prisons. People have died inside Guantanamo Bay. More than 4 people I witnessed when I was there died. There were others in Bagram, when I was in Bagram. After I passed Bagram, like others witnessed, Mozambique witnessed, and died in Bagram. There's always a possibility of death waking up in Guantanamo Bay. You wake up to a possibility of murder. And as I say, they say, the Americans say, the New York Times says that more than 100 detainees have died. This was 2005. More than 100 detainees have died under those detention centers, throughout detention centers which are run by the CIA or observed by the CIA. People waking up in Guantanamo Bay, there is a problem of, you might wake up to a loss of limb or amputation of some parts of your body, like what happened to Amran al-Taifi, and like what happened to Abdul Rahman al-Masri and others, because the medical team there, they say, we cannot give you any medicine. You're not here in hotels. We are not here to help you in any form. If you have pains in your arms, if you have serious injuries, what we could do, we could pull your teeth out. We could amputate your hand or finger, whatever the pain is, if it's really badly injured. But we are not to cure or give you any kind of medicine. And this is said to people who are locked up for 7 years, 6 years, and under a system where everything is made to make you become ill and sick. It's made that their intention of it is to damage you physically and to break you down in a physical form. And obviously the psychological is even worse than the physical form. And even so, if you catch any disease or any illnesses, you're not to be treated for that disease. People's eyes were gouged. So I myself was brought down to the floor and chained, and then one guard pushed his fingers through my eyes, and he did the same to many other people in the same block. It was an isolation block. They wanted to make an example of us. People are beaten to death. Like I said, what happened in Bagram, there's a film called Taxi to the Dark Side, and it speaks about that incident where there's one man who was a taxi driver, simple taxi driver, brought up in Guantanamo Bay, then was beaten so badly until he died, and then they found out that he was an innocent man, that he shouldn't have been in that place in the first place. That film gained an Oscar. It's a very famous film. You could pick it up and buy it. Sometimes you can find it in the internet. People in Guantanamo Bay are deprived of their sleeping. They could face drowning, beatings, psychological torture that are more effective and more worse than any physical kind of torture. The Americans are very skillful and knowledgeable about human nature, about their knowledge and their capability was not used to help people, but in Guantanamo Bay it was used to cause the most damage possible to people's psychic and to people's physical existence. Racism and abuse, hunger and nudity, filth in the food and water, electricity, continuous flood electricity. We live in cells where it's light 24 hours a day. Floodlight for 24 hours a day for 6 years. There are people locked up for 7 years. It means personal search twice every day. Harassment. It means possibility that every day there's a possibility of 5 people coming into your cell and beating you up for small things, trivial things, or because of the interrogators asked them to do so, to humiliate you, to break you down into speaking. People's nose were broken, ribs, fingers, and as I said, as you know, many cases, a couple of cases, people lost their eyes. Filth in the food, flies, mosquitoes. Your words are twisted and used against you. Anything you say is used against you and twisted. Endless new rules that make no sense other than to humiliate and disdain detainees there. It's attacks on your religion and beliefs and sacred things that you hold. Dragged to new sessions dragged to new sessions of interrogations in the middle of night, or dawn, or morning, or day. No protection whatsoever. But the land where there is no law, a land where no law exists, and no lawyers that can help. Fraud and embezzlement. Guards subjected to humiliation, photography, to stand to the wall and photographies taken from you and fingerprints, which is done on a regular basis, again and again. It's done the intention of it is to cause humiliation and to reduce you to numbers, to chain you down to the floor, and handcuffs, waists and hands are handcuffed, and so on. Everything that you say is listened to and is used. Even your whispers, attacks on your indignity, sometimes deliberate injection of medicines, and so on, by force. All these things went on in Guantanamo Bay, and worse. But Guantanamo Bay, ladies and gentlemen, is only one detention camp, which has been well known by everyone. But there are many other detention camps which are worse than Guantanamo Bay. Like when we were locked up in the base in Bagram, it was worse than Guantanamo Bay. The treatment there was worse. There are many other ones, like base in Kandahar. There's another one in Jordan base. There's some in Lithuania, in Kosovo, and there are some in Poland, run by the CIA. There are many around the world, and there are many people who are detained in those prisons. And campaigning and continuing to campaign for the closures of all those places I urge you to do the same, to do that, and to still continue to campaign to close those places. And this brings me to the last point, or the second point I wanted to mention, is to do with, I promise people who are there in prison that every time I were able to speak, I will speak about their cases, and about the cases of people who are still locked up in Guantanamo Bay, which of Mohammed Binyam today is in the news, and he is a Londoner who is locked up in Guantanamo Bay and been treated in such an awful way, and he was rendered. He went to prisons in a base in Morocco where he was tortured, and as you know that there was all sorts of awful tortures were used against him, and he's such a simple, kind guy who used to help to raise the morals of others and try to support others in prison, and he was, now we're trying to get him released from Guantanamo Bay. And the government, we're trying to write letters to the government to get him released from there, because he has not been convicted of any crime. He's been there for more than 7 years, not convicted of anything. He's never been to trials, and no lawyers represent him as such, as a proper form of law or any court. There are others who are from this country, like Shakir Ahmed, who is another resident of this country, who is still locked up in Guantanamo Bay. And he has children here and family here in England. And he has, I think, 4 children, and one of his children he hasn't seen since he was born. He's been more than 7 years, and he has never seen his child. And those 2 people are still locked up in Guantanamo Bay. And their families are very concerned about them. Their conditions, they are under isolation. They are in hunger strike. They've stopped eating, and they're force-fed. Force feeding is that they tie them down and chain them into a place. More than 6 chains from here to here for more than 2 hours. And then they force a tube going inside their nose, and they're going down to their stomachs. Large tubes, and they use those tubes to cause them more pains, so that to prevent them from continuing their hunger strikes. And then they force feed them in this way every day, twice. And they pull out the tubes with blood and pus, and then they put it into a stomach of another person who is in hunger strike, to stop them from continuing their hunger strike. Those people have been in hunger strike for some time now, and they are objecting, because there is no other way to speak to the media or to speak to anyone or to explain themselves or to object other than the way of hunger strike, so that their voices are heard and listened to. because they've been locked up for more than 7 years. And they are not charged of anything. And they have not stood in any court. And they are objecting to their continuation of their imprisonment. And therefore they are hunger striking for all these reasons. And the conditions of many of them are very, 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 very bad, and it is very, very dangerous. Some of them are dying. The lawyer, Jackie might speak about this more, but the lawyer who saw Binyam Muhammad recently, she said he's only a skeleton of bones, skins and bones. He is on the verge of death. The same with Shakir Amir and those people. And for what reason? If they have committed anything, I think the way forward is to put them into trials and let them answer for their crimes. Like in my case, usually those secret evidence are evidence which are flimsy and weak. And if they were brought against them, people recognize that these evidence are not evidence that can stand in any court. And because of that, they make them into secret evidence. I say ending up, I would like to, my presence here is to, as I say, firstly, obviously, to thank you very much for your endless effort and the work you have done for bringing the attention to Guantanamo Bay. But I would like to remind you to continue to campaign and urge you to continue to campaign, not only because of Guantanamo Bay, but to realize, and as I'm sure many of you do know, that there are many, many other prisons who are worse than Guantanamo Bay. Throughout the world, there are international facilities of torture, and they are run by the United States governments or the CIA, supervised and run by the CIA. There is more than 70,000 detainees throughout the world under the American supervision. This is according to the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, the United States Ministry of Defense, saying that there are more than 70,000 who are locked up in those detention centers. And this is 2005. This estimate is only 2005. And so urging you and asking you to continue your good work, to campaign to close all those other places and not to be beguiled by politicians concentrating only on Guantanamo Bay. And also to continue to campaign, to bring back home all those people who haven't committed anything. And they stand innocent by law, and they stand innocent by common sense until they are convicted of anything. And this is a reason that makes me speak. I was silent for 1 year. I couldn't speak to people. I can't cope with my own life. I had problems myself. But what made me come out and speak to people is to, firstly, as I said, to thank them and to encourage them to do more. And I thank you very much for listening to me, for your patience. Thank you.